course, I know you, and I think that everybody who's been in Brazil in tech know who you are. But I think it would be good if you could introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in the past years in Brazil before we start the questions.
So, hello everyone. Ben Gleason, originally from the US actually, but I've been living in São Paulo for about the last 15 years. Went down way before tech was, I think, on the radar. Initially consulting, and then since about 2010 I've been involved in a number of different tech businesses. Probably the most well-known, and starting in 2012, Bolsa. So we were kind of the very, very pioneer on both fintech and then open banking and a series of other things that have developed over time. And we never imagined that fintech would become like a buzzword that normal people in Brazil would know what it was. So it's amazing the progression we've seen. And about 6 months or so, we launched Kamino. So sticking with it, and hopefully we'll have another decade, have a great run, and things will keep pointing the way that they happen. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Turn it on, it works better, right? Technology. Bluetooth, yeah. Fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. Really honored to be here. My name is Edson. I'm an investor in Brazil, working with venture capital since 2003. So, long journey. I've witnessed and worked on a lot of what Margarisi mentioned here. We're going to be talking about it today. 10 years ago, I launched Red Point Ventures, one of the best performing top funds in Brazil. And since April of this year, I'm working with Itaú to build a new investment platform that should be live early next year. Very excited to be here. All of this is really, really great. I won't make the same joke I did not long ago, saying that BayBrazil is my main job, but I've been a board member since 2013, really honored. And I just wanted to take a few seconds to congratulate you, Margarisi. It's been a long journey, very much accomplished in this time, so it's really, really great to be here, and just wanted to thank you so much for everything you do.
Hi everyone, I'm Edson Rigonatti, founder at Astella. We are a knowledge-driven venture capital investor in Brazil. I've been part of the technology sector for the past 25 years. And also the entrepreneurial movement in Brazil that started with Endeavor in 2000, which is also a big portion of what's going on down there. Helped launch Astella in 2008. We bootstrapped as a VC firm. We are going to our Fund 5, have done extremely well, and I think that we are a good testament that it pays investing in tech in Brazil. Glad to be here.
Great. Thank you all. Now, Edson and Anderson, maybe start with you. We all know that the Brazil digital scenario has grown and is booming in the past 10 years, but just so that we can compare to a more mature market like the US, if it's possible to compare, where are we now? Where is Brazil at this point, maybe comparing to other markets?
That's an excellent question, and when we were raising our first fund, we would often use that a metaphor to explain to investors abroad. We would say something like, the US is the reference, and then you have China, which is like roughly 5 years behind, this 10 years ago. And then you would have Europe, which is 10 years behind the US, and Brazil would be after that 15 years in terms of evolution, something like this. 10 years ago, we had a list of things that were missing in our ecosystem. It was a long list, actually. We didn't have participation of corporations. We didn't have large exits, which is something Edson and I, for a while, we carried this. It was a lot of work to say, well, at some point we're going to have exits in Brazil, and they were going to be interesting. So all this list is now with check marks, and I think the gap, obviously we are still behind, so to speak, but I think the gap is much smaller today. In some aspects, I think we have an advantage, meaning the problems that we are solving in Latin America, emerging markets in general, are more profound or more meaningful than the problems being addressed in Silicon Valley today. So I think that it's actually in our favor, especially in a situation like the one we are going to be entered. But I think we are still behind. The best reading I have of the market is very positive, actually. We grew roughly 10x, 10 times our industry in the last 5 or so years. And we are still a tenth of what we should be, given the size of the economy of Brazil today. So irrespective of Brazil growing a little bit or shrinking a little bit, venture and tech especially should grow a lot in the next few years. I don't know if it's 5, 7, or 10, but we're going to grow 10x again. So obviously we all suffer from excess optimism, but I think we are in a yeah, exactly. It feels a lot less stupid to propose this today than 10 years ago or to end. But it's, I think it's a very special time because of so to speak, the flywheel is complete. We have everything. Not everything is perfect, but we have everything, and a very positive perspective in terms of growth. So I think 5 years behind, but we're going to close the gap faster than that, I think.
It's funny because 10 years ago, when we used to go to Israel and ask them, you know, what made your ecosystem so vibrant, we used to hear from them that the ecosystem really took off when second-timers were more prominent than first-timers. And I think that's already a reality in Brazil. So, you know, the biggest change is the amount of human capital launching new companies. So a vintage of second, third-timers, which is really, really special. People don't know that Brazil is the 5th largest producers of unicorns in the globe. We are the 4th largest digital economy in the globe. So São Paulo is the largest city for Uber. We are number 2 for YouTube, number 3 for TikTok, and number 3 for WhatsApp. The value chain is complete from angel, early stage, late stage. We have a public equities market, both local and global. And as Anderson pointed out, if there was a sharp ratio for venture capital in the globe, Brazil would be your best bet, because the industry represents 0.2% of GDP versus 0.6 in the US, 0.55 in China. So if anyone are interested in making money, Brazil is your best bet.
That's amazing. And speaking of that, you are your second time or third time entrepreneur? So now you're starting your third enterprise. What has changed then? What is different now so that we can have the actual examples, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely everything has changed. You know, from the capital perspective, I used to joke, like, you know, when we went out to raise our seed round, you could talk to all the, like, active seed funds in one day. Like a one-day roadshow, and then it was done, and you either had a yes or a no. You know, and now, like, actually, when we went out to raise money now with the seed round, you know, someone said, "Oh, have you talked to these 20 funds from the U.S.?" And I had heard of like maybe 8 of them. So it's just like the amount of capital which has been attracted to Brazil, and I think also, you know, in addition to repeat founders, also you have angel investors who are much more kind of professional, pro founders. We closed actually got our first check. There was some investment bankers, so they were angels, and they wanted to do like a 20-page M&A document for the angel investment. You know, so just all of that kind of bureaucracy and overhead that you have to deal with. Whereas now it's just, you know, everyone is accepted. You have standard, you know, safe terms and everything else. So I think the capital has become much more sophisticated and much more, you know, deep across all the stages, but particularly having, you know, kind of operator angels and operator, you know, funds makes a big difference. And then also, you know, in addition to the quality of the founders, obviously the quality of the talent which we can, you know, bring into our teams now is there's just no comparison. Someone was asking me what was our initial growth strategy for Gleason, and I was trying to remember back to like 2012, and we actually hired an intern from USP, and that was our growth strategy. And now you can like hire someone who's done it 3 times, you know, with different startups, and comes already, you know, with a huge amount of experience. So I think there's, you know, from that perspective as well, we're able to raise a much larger, you know, checks already. You have, you know, the ability to you know, try to build something bigger because you have more money available. You also have the team that can actually build that. So, I'm extremely optimistic. I think, back in the day, we would, say, oh yeah, we could have $1 billion exit, but we didn't really believe it, to be honest, in 2012, because there's just no, there's no benchmark there. And now, I think it's like across the board, across industries, it's very easy to see, the future billion-dollar companies being built now.
And a lot of fund-to-fund sales as well, right? That's something that makes the market grow. And taking from the unicorns that you mentioned, we have, I don't know how many unicorns, but we do have a lot. And there, to my perspective, there's kind of a concentration on fintechs, maybe service, SaaS, right? Is that a trend? Should we keep on betting on that? Do you see other types of industry that we could bet on from now on?
I think that we became global producers of 3 business models: SaaS, marketplaces, and consumer digital. I would say that Brazil does much better on the 3 business model than China and some European countries, because founders are extremely professional. They hire consultants from the US, they hire, as has been pointed out, professional teams. So those are the 3 hardcore segments that we see growing out of Brazil.
And what about, I remember a few years ago, I've been working in this industry for a while now too. I remember a few years ago, part of the pitch of the VCs, of the startups, was their capacity to go abroad, to go to Latin America, to have international products. Is that still a need? Because Brazil is so big now. Anderson, we have like 210 million people fully online all the time. Does this internationalization capacity still important for our startups?
I think so. I don't think it's a matter of need. It's a matter of possibility or opportunity. Also, part of the way that we used to, as you asked before, time-wise, how do we compare to other ecosystems? Another comparison we used to do is, if you look at all the more meaningful ecosystem, tech ecosystems in the world, if you would build a spectrum, you would go from one extreme is Israel, which is highly successful but has absolutely no domestic market for scale at tech. In the other extreme is China, which is just too big. In the past role when I was at Naspers, we were very lucky to be an early investor in Tencent. And when we would talk to the executives there, it's not that they didn't think about abroad. They would not think about outside of their own client base, because there are 500 million people in their product. So they wouldn't talk about China, they would talk about, back in the day it was QQ, their user base. Oh, QQ users. So are you not looking outside? No, we're only looking at our clients when they were launching new products. So it's a completely different ball game. Brazil definitely is closer to China than to Israel, both in size market and depth of tech. Israel is very good in deep tech. Brazil is improving, but I think the possibility of becoming a Latin America player and a global player is, I think the path is the opposite of what you hinted. It's not Brazil is growing and now it's sufficient. It's no, Brazil is growing and becoming more sophisticated, and because of that we can compete abroad. And I think this is becoming more and more common. When 2012, 13, we would say, oh, start in Brazil, then win Latin America, and then go global if you can. I told this to a lot of entrepreneurs, and I was completely wrong in at least 2 cases in my own portfolio. One was Gympass. They started in Brazil, won Brazil, and then went straight to Europe, and then US, and it's a fantastic case. So thanks God they didn't listen to me. And the other one was Pipefy, which was even more extreme. Alessio, who I met when I was at Apontador, we negotiated, he had another venture. He sold the company, and then he said, I'm building something now, but I'm going to build it directly in the US. And I told him, and we are still investors there, and I told him, it's not going to work, I'm only investing because it's you. And he said, no, I think it's really stupid what you're saying. I'm only taking your money as investor because it's you. But I think you're wrong. And he was right. So he started here. It's a brilliant trajectory. He won a lot of challenges that now are passed on to other entrepreneurs. And I think what Edson mentioned is really, really important. To get second and third time entrepreneurs running businesses is really important milestone for the market. And I think they should do that instead of becoming VCs as well, because otherwise it's getting very competitive for them.
I would just maybe add as well, I think there's been an evolution from, in the early days was a lot of B2C businesses. I think it's much harder to build a B2C business in Brazil that's going to become global. You see this evolution to more like B2B or B2B2C, the two examples that you mentioned, which I think is actually much more feasible than to make the jump into international markets. Infrastructure plays, things like this. I think we'll also start to see more going from Brazil to other emerging markets, even outside LATAM. So I think we'll see much more of this because you're building for specific problems which exist in other kind of similar markets. So I think that's actually a great evolution that we've had. And also for us, I think the user acquisition cost is going through the roof on the B2C side. So I think that's driven people also to look at other different models, different distribution models, which creates many more opportunities. And fintech specifically, I think there's still a lot of room to grow. But in a sense, I heard a great fintech investor says that kind of 5 or 10 years from now there won't be fintech startups anymore in his vision, because every startup will have a fintech element. So it'd be like saying, okay, I'm an internet startup 10 years ago, which doesn't make any sense today, because you're seeing this like embedding of fintech in industry specific startups.
That's very interesting. And you founded a financial hub for startups, right? It's your latest venture. So why did you feel the need to start this type of business?
Yeah, and it's Kamino is something that never could have existed 10 years ago because there was no market for it. But when we were starting, actually, we're trying to solve a series of challenges for companies which are growing quickly. But we closed our Series A round. We really needed the money. We had the term sheet. We said, okay, we did it. And then they said, oh, you just have to create a structure in Cayman and Delaware, and then you can have the money. And we were like, how do we do that? And so we spent months and months trying to figure this out just to get the money. Then figure out how to bring it to Brazil, and then you have all these challenges around deploying the money. I think that with everything which has evolved in the ecosystem, and many things are very positive, but we still feel a lot of friction on the kind of the financial flows, and the entrepreneur in Brazil spends a lot of time still kind of figuring out how do I get my credit card to actually work for the SaaS payment, how do I make this international payment, a lot of things which I think entrepreneurs here take for granted, and so we're trying to solve that with Kamino. A lot of the challenges that we went through as entrepreneurs, even 10 years into Gibble, so I still have my personal US credit card for certain payments that simply wouldn't work on our corporate credit cards in Brazil. So I think there's still a lot of challenges kind of around these different frictions, and now the market's big enough and growing fast enough that I think we can build a business starting initially with startups and then going to other larger, fast-growing, more mature companies later.
That's great. I was going to ask what the things that you've done that did not go well, but you mentioned examples already. So let's see with some things that worked out very well. Edson, when you think of your successes and Anderson as well, what do you attribute it to? Good due diligence, good entrepreneurs, luck? what do you say?
I'm going to steal a phrase from Anderson. He always says that when a company does well, there's nothing we can do to improve it. When it goes wrong, there's not much we can do to save it. Most of our time is spent on the messy middle. But I think that in our case, success cases are related to experienced founders, experienced teams that I have worked previously together that makes a hell of a difference. Proprietary distribution channel, when companies grow without having to use paid media, and access to capital. So being able to have a Rolodex of investors throughout the value chain is key, to continue pumping up growth going forward.
Yeah, in our case was luck. joking aside, it's pretty much that. If you talk to most of the really successful founders, there is a small group that will feel a lot of entitlement, but the vast majority of them will say, I was very lucky and I didn't give up. The vast majority. And when I say luck, I really mean it. There are like 4 types of luck. One is I found in the floor a lottery ticket and became millionaire. That's not what we are talking about. There was the 4th type of, we could talk about this for a whole session, but the 4th type of luck is when you dedicate a lot of time in something that you are good at, you do better than the other ones, and you wait long enough so that the luck comes to you. Usually this is what happens. So it's very hard to have a recipe that will work in a time frame that you can predict. So you have to have, in our view at least, have people that are truly passionate about the problem and that will not give up until they get luck. And that's more or less the scenario. So it's you mentioned timing. More and more, maybe it's self-deprecating here because we definitely started way too early, right? But I think it's not time the market, getting the timing right, it's time in the market. So you have to be there, you have to do your work, and success will come sometimes, very rarely overnight, but if you do something right for a long time, you're going to get the results, I think.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about our challenges, right? Because we're from Brazil and we know where things that are going on. So let's start with, we have presidential elections coming up.
Next question.
we need to talk about the elephant in the room, right? So it's pretty polarized and you have should candidates with very different views, right, for the country. How do you see that? Not asking who you're going to vote for, but how they're going to change, where are the opportunities, the issues that you're going to face?
Let's see.
We really spend zero time thinking about that. We don't look at macroeconomics, we don't look at politics. Founders, they don't wait presidents to get elected, they just do it. So we are excited with the fundamentals of the economy. I think that no matter who wins, we have a very stable legal system. So we are comfortable either way. We're more interested in fomenting knowledge, fomenting, bringing the resources for these guys to do their job than anything else. Nothing in this history of venture capital in Brazil happened because of government. Zero.
Yeah, this is probably one of the best side effects of what we do, right? Edson? It is based on secular movements, and ours in Brazil is very favorable. So it's a joke, but it's true. The moment that election or a government or a policy becomes a real problem for venture capital, that's going to be the less of our problems. Meaning, if that affects us, it's because everything else is in much deeper trouble.
Yeah, that was interesting. I was in a panel a few weeks ago, and somebody asked about politics, etc. And someone said that part of being where AI is being used is instability, right? That's what makes it stable, and that's where we actually grow. And in that sense, would you say that Brazilian authorities are cooperative with technology, with innovation? How do you perceive this? I know we have the central bank, we have CVM, our Securities Exchange Commission just issued an opinion on crypto. What's your perception on that?
I went through this when we started Gipple, so we were so early, fintech, and then this open banking with aggregated bank data, and there was the question of bank secrecy laws. We actually talked to a lot of law firms, and nobody would give us a legal opinion that this was possible to ask for bank data. And there was a lot of discussion that the central bank could shut us down. And there was a previous example of a peer-to-peer lending company, which had been shut down by the central bank, and so we were actually that was one of the big risk factors, and probably the thing that maybe most surprised me over the last 10 years is how much the central bank evolved to become, kind of first within Brazil. I think the biggest driver of innovation, and very, very sophisticated. They're talking about blockchain, because they've gone to Taiwan and they've studied there. I was just blown away by the level of the people in the central bank. But then we were actually talking to one of the top Silicon Valley venture capital firms. In the early days, the only thing they knew about Brazil, like macro, was basically what they saw in the New York Times. And they actually told us that they thought Brazil had the best central bank in the world right now. And that's 10 years ago, the VCs here didn't even know that Brazil had a central bank. So I think that to me is incredible. I think there's a lot of room, probably. I'll let these guys talk to, but some of the other ministries probably could improve. But at least the central bank is a great light, and I think really opened up the entire market to innovation.
Just going to agree, and I think it's in different areas we have opportunities to improve. I would not say that any regulator is deliberately playing against any of the industries getting more and more digital. Fintech or banking in general is definitely an outlier. Insurance, which is an area that deserves a lot of, here as well, it's not only in Brazil, deserves a lot of innovation. It started to follow the steps of the banking part probably 10 years ago, so I think this is very good signaling. We were together in investment in the health part that was struggling for 5-6 years, and then because of COVID, a shift, and the company really skyrocketed really fast. So it's very clear that regulator being willing is very favorable for entrepreneurs in general, especially if it's a level playing field, not directing it for one or the other, which hasn't happened in Brazil yet. But I think it's either they are not helping or they are starting to help. I haven't seen, with very few exceptions in specific laws, but I don't see anyone positioning against innovation or anything like that. Obviously, there is always people trying to preserve margins here and there, but in general, I don't think it's hostile in any vertical, right? I don't know if you agree, Edson.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And it's pretty open, right? Any technology is welcome. But we talked about a lot about what changed, right? How we grew, but some things have not yet changed, right? So what still needs to improve? And I don't know, legal framework, or we have 5G technology, but is it working? What do you see that Brazil is still pending to grow further? Edson.
Well, my wish is that we gain more knowledge in terms of growth. Our top quartile growth is middle quartile for the US as a ecosystem. So in order for us to become a real Brazil storm, I think that we need to grow faster. We need to get to the triple, double bandwagon as an overall ecosystem. And we have the money, we have the talent. So I think that the more knowledge we bring to the market in terms of how to grow companies, how to grow organizations, the better off we're going to fare.
Okay, I'd like to open up our questions to the public. Does anyone?
Why we do that? Did you see, Roberto? It's not only me that talks about triple, double, you see.
I love it.
Okay, so it is open.
Oh, I have a question.
There's a
Oh my God, what did I look at?
No, my question is, if you change your mind about go first to USA, for example, instead to go to Mexico or go to emerging markets, and from where come this complex that we can't dominate or lead a technology?
I think some of the characteristics that we had before still are there. So I don't, let me put it, I don't think the journey of winning in Brazil and then going abroad is a bad strategy, because I think it's a lot easier to enter a highly competitive market if you already have a stepping stone, and it's probably easier to build that in your backyard than abroad. So I don't think it's what we tried to do before is wrong today. Definitely, in the case, for example, of PipeFi, that they saw a gap in the market that was global, then it's definitely better, and this is a new position, I was wrong before, it's better to occupy that vacuum than try to start in Brazil, because the risk of someone else building that globally, especially now, is much, much bigger. So PipeFi specifically, when Alessio was running his previous company, he tried to find a tool and couldn't find it in Brazil nor abroad. And said, wow, I can't believe this doesn't exist. So in that type of opportunity, I think growing abroad directly makes a lot of sense. The way I think about it today, Roberto, is in Brazil is a lot harder to start. It's a lot easier than before, but it's still hard to start. You know it pretty well. But it's better after you become a leader, because there is so much to be done that, for example, someone to start a company today and they say, I'm gonna do take bleep better. It's kind of silly with so many things to be done, right? You have a winning position already. Here in the US it's the opposite. It's very easy to start, but as soon as you get a model that is proven, there's so much capital that you're gonna have 5 different teams, super well funded, great people, going after the same opportunity with a slightly different approach. So I don't think we should overlook that situation. Here the fight is really, really tough with a lot of money. So if you believe you can enter, occupy the vacuum, and become the leader of the pack here, I think it's a no-brainer to start that way. If not, it's probably better to have create your competitive barriers in your turf before.
Hello everybody, Luciana. I'm a board member at BayBrazil, also an angel investor. I have an interesting question. I was thinking about you talked about the landscape of investments and so on. So let's go back a little bit. We had the transportation revolution with the Ubers of the world, and then we had the fintech revolution, Creditas, Nubank, digital banking. What's next? What you guys are really focused on for next year and the year after? If it's fintech is kind of old story, is it health tech? Is what? That's my question of the day. But this is your next 2 to 3 years, right? You're planning 3 years ahead, so I'd like to know how you guys are really seeing the market. We know the size, we know it's growing, but which industry specific you guys are going to be investing in?
I can start. We cannot predict, but what we can tell in terms of numbers, by the amount of founders we talk to, I think there are 3 things that are very common these days and are good predictors of what's going to happen in the next 2 years. First one is B2B payment, right? I think that B2C payment has been, completely blew away, and I think that same is going to happen to B2B. 2, I think that we have seen over the past decade the consumerization of the enterprise. I think that I'm going to see the enterpriseization of the consumer. So we have used SaaS in business for the past 10 years. Now we're going to start using SaaS as users. And a third thread that is very common to what we see these days is this breakout of the social networks. So people going to niche communities to talk about music, talk about cooking, talk about money. So those are the 3 things that over the past 6 months caught our attention.
Yeah, I agree. 2 comments that might contribute somehow. First, to our despair as a bank, I think fintech is just in the beginning. In many ways, I think what we've seen is a first wave of an attempt in disrupt banking services and financial services based on technology. I think there will be a wave with offering completely new products and solutions to the same issues. This is more on the competition side of it, but I think there is a huge opportunity in Brazil and Latin America for financial services that are not offered yet. And this is like blue ocean, whatever you want to call it. So there is a lot of problems without solutions today. In Brazil, some of them we have examples here. In the US, in the UK, there's a lot of interesting services that are not available in Brazil yet. So I think fintech, it's far from last year's. I think we're going to see a lot of innovation and activity on that going forward as well.
Where's the mic?
With me, just a question. My name is Daniel Franco from Project Investimentos. One question about cross-border investments or market acquisition. I think it's understandable in company US will have tons of money here, but in terms of clients, would it make any sense to go to, for example, to other markets like Africa, Middle East, emerging markets, with problems that are more similar to the problems that we see in Latin America? And in terms also of money, what do you think about cross-border with Europe and China?
Yeah, I mean, I think for specific solutions, if you can find markets which are more similar to what you're trying to solve, it makes a lot of sense. Oftentimes, I think in the past we always looked to the U.S. for the benchmark to inspire us. Now we can actually look to other emerging markets. So sometimes they're more ahead. Like with Kamino, one of our big benchmarks is Razorpay, which is like $18 billion kind of company, which is basically, in India there's not a lot of credit card penetration, so they've completely rethought the way that they're doing kind of payments between businesses and consumers. In the US, they're kind of completely dominated by credit cards. So I think there are opportunities either to be inspired by benchmarks in emerging markets or to go from Brazil to other emerging markets. Certainly, I think the one challenge, which I just bring up in general on the discussion here, is I still don't think there's enough, a broad enough and a deep enough tech talent pool in Brazil. So one of my co-founders was working at Amazon with global teams, and he said that the kind of average developer and the top developer in Brazil is still far below what you find in other markets. And so I think also for going straight to the US, you better have a really good dev team, because the development talent is probably still stronger here. So I think that's something in Brazil we still need to develop. I think English is getting better. English is still an issue though. So I think going into other markets, there's a language issue as well as a tech talent issue. So for specific businesses it can make sense, but in general I still think that it's kind of easier to start in Brazil, get the product market fit, make sure that you really have solved the other issues, and then look at the markets that look like Brazil but don't have the similar products yet.
Hi, I'm Stephen. I'm curious, you started to allude a little bit about the human capital that's down in Brazil, and skill set and so forth, right? And building that out, and it sounds like you're building out more of the infrastructure and so forth, right, for the digital commerce. How do you see the change in the consumer behavior, right, and disposable income and so forth? Because you can make something, but someone has to be able to afford it, adopt it, and fuel that network effect.
I would just say briefly, in Brazil, it went so fast to digitalization, and so you saw, even before COVID, like the banks had a huge strike, and they shut down all the branches, and that killed the bank branch model, because consumers immediately went to digital. So I think that's, first of all, a really good thing, and consumers are used to paying so much, just kind of taxes on things and surplus costs that you can go into digital and oftentimes offer something cheaper, but you actually have, you can still build a great product with great unit economics just by removing a lot of the inefficiency and then some of the fees that are on top. And so I don't see it as a huge problem, although I think we do live in a little bit of a bubble in Sao Paulo and the digital space. I'm sure that there's a lot of markets in which we are not even close to penetrating.
Yeah, I think Ben stole a little bit my thunder here, but it's an excellent question. I think it's interesting to look at two aspects. The digital behavior in Brazil and Latin America it's actually pretty interesting. There is the adoption is very quick, especially if you take into account the education level. So, you know, people just figure how to do things everywhere. As Edson mentioned, adoption of a lot of different technologies, including complex ones. So the appetite and the behavior for digital is right there. But to your point, the share of wallet, disposable income, preference is an issue. As I mentioned before, what you just said here, in the US, for example, extreme example, okay, but before this squeeze in the funding market, we had like, I think 7 or 8 companies looking into how to improve the distribution here in the Valley from, I don't know, 1 hour to 45 minutes delivery, right? In Brazil, we are still looking at how to deliver a product in any time to the interior of, to the countryside of São Paulo itself, not talking about the Amazon. So, you know, like the depth is much bigger of the gap, which makes it more valuable in a way. So, you know, it is there. For example, if you go to insurance, for example, if you look at the US, I don't know, it's probably something like 90% of the fleet for cars is penetrated. Brazil is 30%, and for Brazilians should be a lot more because it's oftentimes the most valuable item in the household. But from a disposable income perspective, they are still picking, do I buy insurance for my car or do I buy a microwave that I don't have yet? So, you know, it's, there is an inclination on the tech side, on the economic side, it is an emerging market, and you know, with all the problems and opportunities that it brings.
Hi, I'm sorry for the voice, but I lost my voice yesterday in the Flamengo game.
I'm going to answer your question.
I'm Mariana, I'm founder at BayBrazil in Brazil, and now living here at Stanford, I see how hard the market and the school is pushing around climate. And being Brazil, like owning the Amazonia and being such a powerhouse for food production and environmental services, why is climate not listed within the trends you guys are seeing? And how do you think Brazil will play a role in tech for climate?
Oh, I can take that one, the hard one, right? We were discussing this yesterday at Stanford, right? And I think that without the volume of founders going after a theme, it's very hard for us to invest in it. The opportunity is there, the market is huge, but without, you know, a wave of people trying to invade that space, it becomes very hard. It's very tough to predict when such a thing is going to happen. You know, no one really knows exactly what triggers fintech in Brazil, what triggers SaaS in Brazil. What we know is that it usually takes about a decade until you start seeing a lot of people doing something for something to become big. So we started with Endeavor in Brazil in 2000. We started investing in 2010. We started mentoring GovTechs in 2010. We invested in GovTech in 2020. So I think that it's going to take a while. It's going to require a lot of people, a lot of founders trying to tackle something for us to go after it.
Okay, we have time for one.
I think I have loud enough. Don't worry.
Hi, I'm Rigonatti. I'm half Brazilian and half Chinese. So it's great to be here with so many Brazilians. It's great. The situation in China is that there are many regulatory constraints with regards to blockchain and crypto. I wanted to get an idea because I've been here, you know, in the US for quite a long time, and I'm not up to date with how's the Brazilian government. Are they open towards blockchain and crypto, or what's happening in the regulatory aspect? Thank you.
There's a founder there that I could answer that.
Just give it to her.
Hi. Sorry for my voice as well. I'm a founder of Verts Company, and we are in the lift challenge that the central bank has put in an RFP to use cases of the CBDC, the central bank digital currency. So they launched this lift challenge before regulating crypto, and they asked for use cases. So they received 47 projects, and they selected 9 with different use cases across offline, online, delivery versus payment, and different use cases. And every group needs to deliver an MVP, and then they will start analyzing how they're going to really regulate the market. And CBM, as she said, our local SEC, has just issued a memo on crypto and securities, public securities. So the government is really pushing and know that this is a trend, and they are willing to support entrepreneurs and the market as a whole.
Hi guys, very nice to see you. My question relates to the customer behavior again. One of the, I'm living here for almost 2 years, and one of the things that struck me, that shocked me, is, for example, WhatsApp, right? In Brazil, we use WhatsApp for everything, for work, for sending documents, for talking to friends, to everything. And one of the things that shocked me is that here I don't see that. I think here's always SMS, is email, but it's like 10% of what we saw, what we see there. So we are in the epicenter of the technology, or one of those, right? So why? I mean, this. Do you understand it? I don't understand this. Why does this happen, in your opinion?
Cost. It's a cost structure issue. So here in the US, it took a while for the cellular companies to include WhatsApp as part of the data plans, and they had lots of bandwidth available for SMS, or SMS was virtually free in the US. Brazil was quite the contrary. SMS was extremely expensive and quite cheap to tuck broadband into everyone's plans. So it's a cost issue. And our problem going to usage, if I'm not mistaken, 37% of the Brazilian population do not get to the end of the month with full bandwidth. So it's impossible to use more services if they can pay for bandwidth.
Okay, so last question. I know. So let's end on a high note. We talked about trends and very, very good things that are happening. So what makes you optimistic? We are all optimistic, I know. When you think about Brazil, where we're going, what do you see that's different and that makes you want to continue investing in that? That's a question for all of you.
I mean, the two things I would say, one is there's still huge problems to solve. So I think you can have a really ambitious goal and create massive social impact as you're building great business. And so I think that's really exciting about Brazil. And the other thing is just the talent. In the past, I think that the post-MBA Brazilians would go work in the US, or they'd go work for an investment bank, for a consulting shop. Now they're going directly to found companies, or the great even like analyst talent used to join the established banks and things, and now they're actually going straight to startups. So that really excites me. I think that we're just like at the tip of the iceberg in terms of the talent which is going to come into the sector, and that's going to propel us for the next 10, 20 years. Just on pure kind of increase in talent of founders and teams.
Yeah, I would go back to what I mentioned before, is the position that we are in with a recent 10x growth behind us, and every precondition to start a business and grow this business with check marks today, and the perspective that we are still way smaller than what we should. I think it's plenty for us to be very excited and optimistic about the future. I think when we started, I think the right word was hope that the market would happen. Now it's, you know, a lot of people say, yeah, lucky you that you are there. I say, no, lucky me if I had started 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? Right now it's so obvious. I don't know if it's for everyone, but for us, right, that's for a long time we could see it, or we thought we could see it. Now it's like shouting at us. It's right there. So I really think we are in a very special position as an industry in general in Latin America. I think it's going to be really, really great 5-10 years ahead of us.
I'm excited by the sheer amount and quality of founders. We see approximately 1,100 founders per year. That number has been growing 5-10% a year, but the number of real opportunities is exponential. So last year, 48% of our deal flow was something that we were actually interested in, versus 18% in 2016. So it's very tough not to do deals because there are so many great founders, so many great opportunities. It's really exciting.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for listening to us.
Thank you.
Great.